Hey everyone, and welcome back to Just Start, the podcast where we skip the theory and get straight to the raw, unfiltered truth about building from scratch. I'm your host, Resh from the Boon platform. Now, every week, as you know, we sit down with founders who've been deep in the trenches, the one who know what it's like to stare at a blank screen and will something into existence. Today's guest is taking on something even messier than startups, modern dating. I'm excited to introduce Mark Kilaghbian. I hope I didn't butcher your name, the founder and CEO of Dating.ai, the world's first AI matchmaker built to kill swipe fatigue and help people find real connections without profiles or endless scrolling. Mark, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Okay, Mark, straight off the bat, for anyone who has never heard of it, what is Data.ai in one sentence, and who is the Cupid in your world?
So dating, it is .io. That is one correction I'll make just so we make sure to get the SEO right. So dating.io, we're essentially trying to build it's hard, honestly. Probably should have gotten the AI. That would make more sense. But we're trying to build a data-driven matchmaker. And so with my last company, what we did is we help market researchers use third-party data to fundamentally understand people, their buying habits, their behaviors, and just better understand the world that we're living in. And we got very good at helping researchers do that. We worked with, Harvard Business School around COVID stimulus research studies. We worked with Target and Best Buy, but I always really wanted to take that technology and instead of like matching people with market research, match people with each other. And so what we decided to build was to take a lot of these same social signals and see if we could use it to figure out which people would get along and how to create the narratives that might drive them to take a chance on each other. So find the commonality between any two people, help them understand the ways that they might be similar as opposed to the ways that they might be different. Take a lot of the busy work out of creating your bio, answering silly prompts that, are always stressful. I personally just hate filling out dating apps. So we wanted to automate all of that, see if we could just pull in your digital footprint and create an unbiased but accurate view on who you are, and then give you essentially a little buddy that just follows you along throughout your dating journey and helps suggest people, helps suggest things to do, is there for you when you want to talk to it after a date and let you know how it went and ask what its opinion is and ask if you should text her right after or like all of her Instagram pictures. Even when you're in a long-term relationship, have the ability to use it for things like conflict resolution, planning the perfect anniversary, the perfect gift, or even just simple things like what should we not watch on Netflix today? Where should we go tonight to eat? What should we order on Uber Eats instead of arguing for an hour? If we both have somewhat different dietary restrictions. So it's built to just kind of take the pain points out of dating. And instead of using AI, replace interaction, see if it can enhance interaction and make those interactions easier.
So, Mark, that's a very interesting background. Sounds like you're building all-in-one, not just not a dating app, also like a therapist app, like a counseling app, like your wing buddy. It sounds like I got my personal concierge just to sort out my dating life there. Is that what you're building?
Essentially, yeah, it's meant to be kind of like if it's everyone's best friend who's trying to hook them up with their other best friend, is kind of how I like to think about it. I think we all used to have that mutual friend who would say, oh, you should really, meet my best friend. I think you'll get along for all of these reasons. And then once you're in a relationship, you have that person to kind of ask them, oh, should I take them here or there? Or are they do they hate sushi? I can't remember. Do you think they're going to like this gift that I'm thinking about getting them? And having that, I think, really can strengthen a relationship and just help you, one, translate. I think there are a lot of places where we just simply don't understand each other. And so if you were to ask that friend, is she going to be offended if I just take her out for coffee on a first date? Or is she someone who's going to want, me to pull up in the limo and take her and do something all out? Or is she going to think that's way too try hard of me? And, you don't really know. People can have very different opinions on that. You just have to know them. And, you might not mean to offend them by asking them on a coffee date first. You might just, be thinking that's low pressure and that's what they want when really they want the opposite. So it's meant to just kind of give you the little hints that you might need to be successful without kind of taking the romance or the excitement out of it and just giving you the best shot at actually getting to know each other in person is really the goal, and not get hung up on any little misunderstandings or mistranslations that might prevent you from getting that opportunity.
Now, help me go back to the 0 to 1 origin. I'll always love to understand the background there. Do you remember the exact moment you thought, screw it, I'm building an AI matchmaker? And what was happening in your life that particular day?
I honestly do remember I was in Hawaii visiting one of my best buddies. He was one of my co-founders from a previous company, and he had this sick place in Hawaii he'd invite me out to. And I was at the time working on a high risk payments platform. We had just gotten an offer for an acquisition on that. So I was starting to think, okay, what should I do next? And this was always something I'd really wanted to do with the previous data monetization company. And so I randomly met this like native Hawaiian guy, and he told me like to get into fasting. It was like he seemed very like, I don't know, tuned in. And he was like, you really need to fast. I'm on day 7 of my fast. And I was like, whoa, you can fast for 7 days? And I was like, I'm gonna try it. So me and my buddy were like, let's just both fast for 7 days. And we did that. And then like all of a sudden all these ideas just came to me, and I just started mapping it out. The rest is kind of history. Started building out the team. I was lucky enough that I've been doing this for a while, so I know a lot of good people across, some of the best data scientists in the world, some really incredible marketers who have done work on a lot of female-focused brands like Halo Top and Olipop, and then really sophisticated investors who fundamentally understood the value of data and the insights that you can glean from it. I just started piecing together what my team would look like, building out some early decks, which sometimes I'll still look back on. I think overall we've done a pretty good job of turning it into reality. But I will say, when we first started, people were very hesitant at the idea. They were like, no one's going to trust AI with this. This was, 2023, ChatGPT 3 had just started to roll out, and people were really not ready to hand over, one, their data, or two, like, uh, a lot of decision making in their lives to AI. But I quickly saw that start to change, and I knew it would over time. But I think in the earliest days, the hardest part was a lot of investors would say, oh, you're just a wrapper. You have to build a foundational model. And it was like, okay, well, if you want to give me $1 billion, I honestly think I probably could get a team together and build you a pretty good one. But I don't think you're going to give me $1 billion. You're going to throw it at Ilya and all these guys who are just going to blow it and not do anything with it. So until then, we're going to focus on the data and the context, which I think is really the key, and I knew would be the key of kind of taking it to the next level at this point. And so it's the hardest part about being early sometimes, is just convincing everyone else that this is where the world is going to be in 3 to 5 years when all the pieces finally come together, which is almost where we are now.
So, how did you get from the point of creating an idea, which for everybody listening, that's one way to brainstorm, go on fasting. I'm sure you get something out of the hunger pangs and everything, some ideas it will generate. But now, you know what, I joke, but I've done something similar, and the mental clarity is insane when you fast. So I'm
I
not
mean,
surprised
yeah,
at all that
your
you
body
experienced
is
that.
like, we better survive. You better come up with an idea to go get some food or something, or else we're gonna die. And it's like, here's some ideas, man. Go figure something out.
Okay, take us back then to that particular day zero. What did the very first version of dataing look like? And what was hilariously broken? And how did you understand that? We always hear like data is the new oil, data is the new oil. But how do you identify that particular pain point? I understand the AI perspective, but to use data, like how you're using, where did that come from?
I mean, that really came from my previous company because we worked with so much of this data. And frankly, the hardest part about it was we could not find data scientists who could actually analyze all this data at the same time. We had 32 data sources. We could pull everything from your financial records to your medical records. Like, we could do whatever. But the problem was, I expected to go to PayPal or some of these big companies that worked with a lot of like financial data and find some data scientists who could, meld the financial data with the fitness data, with the medical data, and like create stories around it. And I couldn't find anyone to do it. There's one guy who I could find who I'd worked with in the past, who we still work with today, and is like, frankly, just like one of the best in the world. But aside from that, it was very hard to find anyone that could do it. I recognized pretty early that AI could do a really good job of telling a story with the data, and it sometimes was not accurate enough for like research, but for the purposes of like making a warm introduction to someone and understanding kind of generally who they are, it was doing a really good job of that, which is really what I was hoping it could do. And I think in the early days, the problem was it would do it perfectly 80% of the time, and then 20% of the time just go totally off the rails and just start making stuff up and say, well, he is an astronaut. And be like, no, I'm not an astronaut. Like, you can't say that. And so just like getting the right context into the right places was the hardest part because we had so much context. We couldn't just put it all in. We had to essentially dilute it down to minimize the data and then maximize it again through the storytelling around it. And so it was a lot of essentially compressing and then uncompressing and seeing how accurate we could get by doing both at the same time. And as the models got better, that got easier, but sometimes it was two steps forward, one step back, and it would get better at some parts and worse at other things. And that was honestly the most frustrating part, is just the amount of A/B testing you would have to do to run through a system where I can understand why a lot of people haven't put out these products, because you have to essentially account for every possible input that a human can put in the box, and that's a lot of paths. That's a lot of permutations you have to account for and watch and see just how people interact with it in ways you would never expect, and somehow get down a path where you were like, oh, I never would have expected someone to ask this question. And now the bot is telling them, that their dream girl is going to meet them on the corner at 6 p.m. and that's not going to happen, and it's like, no, you can't do that, but you can't just tell people to go show up somewhere and no one's going to be there and be like, yeah, I promise she's going to be there. It's like, no, she's not. So there was a lot of testing we had to do internally to make sure it didn't go off the rails much. But it was interesting to see how the bigger model providers really, they were pretty irresponsible with this stuff and were willing to put out models that would do that, let developers build on top of them probably before they were ready. And I think that's a big reason why they're trying to claw back some of the older models right now, is because they recognize that and they're trying to get people on the new stuff that is a little more guardrailed. But people also don't like that stuff as much because the guardrails ultimately take a little bit of the authenticity or away from it as well.
So when you tested it out on your core group or your sample group, the other party on the other side, or was this just complete beta between you and another colleague going back and forth? Or have you actually tested it in an A/B testing, like nobody knows that the AI is behind it? And what has been the feedback there?
So, I mean, yeah, I've tested a lot of it just on myself. And so I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna if other people are gonna be using it, I'm gonna be using it and throwing myself in as the guinea pig and using it on my own life. And so that was the first thing I did, was found a lot of cool girls who I was dating just throughout the process who were like, yeah, I'll guinea pig it with you and you can, kind of throw me in the system and see if it makes good recommendations. And right away it started making some very good recommendations that I never would have expected. There was one girl I went to a rave with, and I really liked this girl. And the bot was like, just don't mess up the pictures. She really cares about her outfit. She's putting a lot of time into it, and she really likes to post it on Instagram after. And I was like, yeah, she doesn't care about pictures. She's cool. She's trendy. She doesn't care about what everyone else thinks. And I screwed up those pictures so bad that she blocked me and never talked to me again. I was like, wow, the bot knew. The bot could have saved me from this situation. And it was a situation I really did not want to screw things up with this girl. I really liked her. And if I, for whatever reason, had just believed the bot, I would have been happy to just put a little extra time into that and not screw things up. But that was a very aha moment of this thing actually can give you insights that you would not expect and help you understand someone that you're just getting to know and keep you from screwing things up that are just dumb reasons for, a relationship to fail. And I just continued to do that. And we also had many of the people who worked with me using it with their significant others. And there would be some who might be on the verge of a breakup who all of a sudden it would come in with the perfect advice to get things back on track and help them understand what the problems were with the relationship that they were having and how to overcome those things and remind them why they actually liked each other and the things that brought them together. So it was really exciting to be able to use it in real time, see it working. Every time I got kind of down on myself, it would do something where I was like, yeah, this thing works. And maybe it only works 80% of the time right now, but man, if it can save 80% of relationships that would fail and those are important to people, that is pretty impactful. And I think then we had to, once we started to get that part right, we started to have to think about, okay, when should it save relationships? Should some just fail earlier than others? And there are so many other questions that you have to start asking. But the most interesting part, I think, is just there aren't that many people asking these questions at the big dating apps or the big companies, and they aren't wrestling with what are the what is the moral or ethical thing to do? How do we optimize these things? What is the solution to the matching problem? How do we actually understand if two people can be compatible over time? Is there a perfect situation you can put them in that'll make it work? Or is it just bound to fail if they're incompatible and you don't want to match them together to begin with? So finding the right people to work with, I think, who really care about solving the problem has been probably the most interesting part because, there are probably five professors who are really thinking about this deeply when there are 1,000 thinking about finance and the economy and all these other things. So it's a pretty small world, which I found to be super interesting, but I think it's super important. So it's been easier than it should be to attract a really high quality team to try and solve the problem.
So that's interesting that you say it's really should be relatively easy. Now, how did you get people to work for free or for equity? Because we've been building for a while, and to get people to commit to a project where they might not see an end, and they also need to make a living, and you also have to be like the motivator, like, look, there's paradise at the end of this rainbow. We have to get there. How did you motivate them? Number one. Number two, um, what level of funding do you have when you first started, or was it pure sweat equity from everyone?
So it was a little bit of both. When we very first started, I brought on a few co-founders who we gave like good chunks of equity to, people I could trust, who I knew would kind of be in it for the long haul, who I had worked with loosely on other projects in the past for the most part. So I built out sort of the core team, and then I built out an advisory team of pretty high level people who really knew what they were doing, couldn't commit full time, but could commit, maybe 20% of their time and were willing to really throw in if I would give them a higher than expected advisory equity share. And then from there, we just started building out the team slowly. So we raised a little bit of capital. We raised about 150,000 from a previous investor of one of my companies who was willing to kind of take a chance on us when most people wouldn't have. And his willingness to come in is a pretty big statement just because he's pretty respected, and it's not that easy to get him to invest in things. And then you just kind of like keep building it. You find people who are excited about it. I think it's honestly sometimes easier when you don't have as many resources to hire really quality people because they are there for reasons that are not just the money. For the most part, would let people keep a side job because I recognize they probably needed to make money, but they also were typically like pretty unfulfilled in whatever those side jobs were. So it wasn't what they wanted to be doing, but it was something that paid the bills. So they wanted some avenue where they could really let their creative juices flow and work on something mission driven that they cared about. And so it was partially identifying people like that who ultimately wanted something more out of their work. And I think that's probably the biggest skill to have, is just find the people who can't sit still, really care about doing something that matters. And then it is just a matter of like leading from the front. Whenever there's something that someone on the marketing team can't do, I jump in and I show them this is how I do it. When there's someone on the development team who can't figure out what the front end should look like, I whip up a front end and show them this is what the component should look like. When there's a question on the data science team with the architecture, I say, okay, I played with the 10 permutations. Here's what I think works best. Let me know if you guys agree. And so just letting everyone know that you can lead from the front, that you fundamentally understand what their role is and you can help them do it, I think is important. But also giving them the freedom to take chances and risks. And we hired on a lot of interns in the early days and gave them a lot of responsibility, allowed them to take ownership of entire platforms for TikTok or Instagram or product pillars where they'd be working on core components of the app. And they got to put those on their resumes and they had a cool experience to talk about going forward. And the ones who did continue on after the internship ended up getting really good jobs, which we could then show, new people coming in. Like this is at the intersection of a lot of important things that people are interested in, especially employers. So having this experience can be really good at getting you to the top of the pile. So it's just really all just about understanding what each employee is looking for. Are they looking for a job at Meta? Do they want, a role that can retire them someday? Do they just want something to stick on their resume in between, two other internships that they just have a gap for? And then just figuring out how you can help them achieve that goal. But it is, especially running, I'd say the hardest part is doing it in a decentralized way because we have people all over the country, all over the world. And so managing schedules, especially when a lot of people have other jobs on the side and knowing, okay, when are all the times that we can meet? What are the things that we're all gonna like to do to keep the team together and make sure people are talking and interacting? That was probably the hardest part for me because I'm not a big crack the whip guy, so I'm not usually good at saying, "You got to talk to him. Why did you coordinate on this back end change? You know, I know he's in Bosnia and you're in California, and you got to coordinate." But you find ways to do it, and you get the right people in a room together, and they figure it out if they know what they're doing.
So I like the idea when you say that you bring on people, give them loads of responsibilities, and it's done in a decentralized manner. Now, like you said, somebody could be, hypothetically speaking, I'm not sure if the person actually lived in Bosnia or somewhere in, let's say, Asia, and part of your team is in America, Northern America. So now you can't be, like you say, observing what they're doing at every moment or every tweet or every post they do. How much a fuck up is a fuck up before you say like, whoa, that's going to kill us? Or before you say like, okay, you see everything as experimentation. It didn't hit the note. Let's rewind. Let's power it through. If something's not working, there's a mechanism for you to just list somewhere. What's your experimentation cycle and where do you draw the line is too far or not enough of risk?
Yeah, I mean, that is an ever changing calculation. And a lot of that is just you kind of wing it and you figure out, okay, is this something that just makes me cringe? Like, so a lot of the TikTok content, sometimes it would be just like, you're like, okay, this is rough. This is just too basic, too simple. Or my investor would be watching TikTok and be like, yeah, the TikTok content's pretty underwhelming. And then you kind of have to go back to the interns and say, okay, let's try to reframe, give them some examples of what we want as opposed to what they're doing, and just help them understand, okay, here's kind of the goal. But at the same time, it's tough because if you give them too much flack, then they're going to go really conservative and really safe. And sometimes that's worse. So you don't want to overcorrect, I think, is the key. And so you really want to gently nudge people in the right direction. But there definitely have been. And I mean, I think, we really did have, one of our backend developers was actually in Bosnia and one actually was in North America. And there were some things where, like, just for like the onboarding, like one of them had like a hard coded onboarding and one of them did like a chat onboarding where the bot like got all of your onboarding info, and the other one had like a hard coded one, and then they like didn't reconcile, and I had to pick which one we were going to go with, and both of them were like, well, I worked all this time on this, and so then they were kind of frustrated, and we're still even to this day like kind of like reworking the onboarding as a result of that. And I think we ultimately went back to the one that I had decided against initially. And that was largely just because one of the developers, like, he put a lot of time into it and he was, it was cool. But wasn't necessarily best for the users and wasn't the most efficient way to do it. I don't think it was ultimately. And so now we've kind of like moved back in the other direction. But it's, a lot of game time decision making, figuring out, okay, how do we make sure mostly just that people are communicating so they're not working over each other, I think is the hardest part. And then if you hire good enough people, they won't make many of those mistakes. And so they really did not make many mistakes like that. And for the most part, it was totally fine. But there are the little things where you got to recognize, okay, where might they not be communicating and where should I have made sure that they were in a room together working on this together. Because sometimes, until that's once you're in an office together and everyone really knows each other super well, some of that collaboration becomes a lot easier. But when one guy is, traveling around the world, hanging out in Thailand, and the other one's in LA and they're not overlapping much, that can be tough. So I'd say that was probably the hardest part. I really tried hard not to overcorrect people because you want to give them freedom to just go out and try things. And the best people will be the types who don't like being overcorrected or actively manage too much, is what I've noticed.
It's interesting that I worked in a number of DeFi startups and now building Boom as well. I've noticed it's better to mess up on messaging because then you can realize what doesn't hit well than not take the shot. Because if you're not taking the shot, you will never see what failed. I know it sounds easier said than done while we are talking about this, but my experience has been that, to be honest. And I noticed one thing, that there's no such thing as bad advertising or bad marketing. I mean, I look at Facebook, for example. I mean, when I used to use it, whenever they change any feature, for first 1 week or 2 week, people will grumble and complain, this is horrible. But then they settle in back to, I sort of like this. So I realized,
Yeah.
okay, people's pain threshold is actually not that deep, or that what say they don't hold on to things like that once they used to it over a period of 72 hours or 96 hours. I had no scientific study on this, just a personal observation on how I used to behave using apps and how others have been doing it. Now, Mark, I should have asked this before, and you did answer part of it. Why now for AI dating? And if I look at Meta, I look at all the other Instagram and all, they have a lot of data points that they can rely on. I'm sure they've looked into this as an optionality as well, or all the other Tinder, Bumble, Hinge. Why now is the right time you feel that AI dating is the time now?
I mean, so I would say there are a lot of points to address there. I'd say one, I've really wanted to disrupt the dating industry for a while. Dating apps, I think, have just done a terrible job of providing people enough context to get to know each other and get to the first date. And I think if you talk to a lot of people, they'd say the chemistry.com and eHarmony and OkCupid, it was a much better experience. You were able to like fundamentally understand each other on a much deeper level because people were just incentivized to provide a lot more information, and it was less of a quantity game and more of a quality game, which I think is what you want ultimately. And then there is this switch to swiping. And ever since the switch to swiping, there's really been like no innovation done. But I think as a result, there hasn't been an innovative technology that was disruptive enough to change that and kind of user behavior. And it is very hard to change user behavior when you've been swiping for 10 or 15 years, getting used to something new. It has to be considerably better. And I think when I saw AI, I saw the first opportunity to really do this significantly better than they could do it, and potentially do it in a way where at least the large incumbents who had lost the trust of their users, like Meta, I found that to be really interesting because when I was doing my last company, we had, 32 data sources and we could multi-source validate all of this data in a way that Meta couldn't. Meta's head of data integrity came to us and was like, we need help verifying our data. And that's when I realized, oh, like, they can't get people to provide this data to them because all they've done is screw them over with it and provided less and less value over time to the point where people have zero trust in them. But they really need it now, not just for advertising. Back then, they really just wanted it for ad targeting, but now they need it to train their AI models. And that's why they're putting out all these AI waifu agents that are meant to just, flirt with you and get this data out of you so they can get conversation history of you talking to their bot and then train their bot with it going forward. Other labs, like labs in China, are desperate to get that conversation data because they can train a new model off, 1,000 users' conversation history if they can just get that, which is not that much. But the big labs really struggled to create experiences where people wanted to provide it or trusted them with it. And so that's where I think we've had our opportunity as an upstart company without a reputation yet, where we can build that trust with our users on the ground level, provide them enough value that they feel comfortable sharing, and they don't have to share everything. They can just share what they're comfortable with. And, I think Facebook has tried, frankly, to copy a lot of what we've done. They introduced an AI matchmaker well after we did, and they took a lot. I mean, it looks exactly like our platform. Like they got, and even down to the PR releases of the examples they use were examples I was using all over the place. But, they honestly just still can't do it as well because they don't have as much context, and the things people put in Facebook are dated. And they aren't, at the level that you might need to really fundamentally understand someone. But I think, a lot of the bigger incumbents are, constantly learning from us. They're keeping an eye on what we're doing. We have to move faster than they are, which we can do because we're agile and we're small and they have a much bigger user base, and we can be a little edgier, a little more fun than they can. Facebook has, a billion users and they have to cater to a billion different preferences. Whereas when we're small, we can cater to a smaller subset and we have a little more flexibility there. So it's a lot of it is recognizing like, where can David fight Goliath? Where do we have an edge that they don't have? How can we take what other people might see as an advantage and turn it into one of their weaknesses so that we can really take the fight to them? And that's what's exciting to me and fun, but it is definitely hard when you're competing with companies that have 1,000 times more resources than you do.
So, Mark, here's a bit juicy stuff I want to dig in. How did they find out about what you're building? Is it because people who used to work for you joined them, or companies like these are always on the prowl to see what's cutting edge? And how do you protect some of your IP there?
So, yeah, I mean, a lot of investors, there was this big push to build in public, I think, early on. And a lot of people were looking at Cluely and other companies and saying, you have to build in public, you can't go stealth. And I think a lot of that was frankly bad advice. I didn't really want to do that, but we were kind of pushed into it by a lot of people who said, you've got to do it. And so I was like, okay, we'll build in public, we'll put all this stuff out in beta, we'll get people actually using it. And so they're the people from their companies were using the platform. And we were one of, two or three that existed, and we were the closest to what all of them wanted to do. So it was not that hard for them to use the platform and see what we were doing directly. And I think aside from that, they were tracking me down at conferences. I was getting, like they have their little spies all over the place looking, trying to figure out. And then you talk to investors too, a lot of investors. I get 3 or 4 meetings with them, tell them how things worked, and then they go back a competitor, or I'd find out, oh, they're a majority shareholder in Bumble or Tinder, and now all of a sudden the CEO is going out talking about all the things I just said in this meeting. And so there is just a lot of that. It's a very dirty game, but at the end of the day, what I've noticed is if you are not the person who had the idea, you're probably gonna just bastardize it when you try to implement it, and it's not going to come out as good. And so they might be able to take the ideas I had yesterday, but they don't have the ideas that I'm going to implement tomorrow. And so you just have to stay one step ahead of them and be confident that you can outmaneuver them when necessary. But I think it has been definitely frustrating at times to see words out of your mouth coming out on Good Morning America with one of these CEOs.
Okay, Mark. Now, because I want to dig in for my audience are people who just want to start. Hardly got any money. You've shared how you started, how you got pull work for you for free, how you motivated them. Marketing in general is bloody brutal. My experience is that just to get eyeballs these days is a dopamine hit game. Especially if you want to build something that's engaging, you got about 15, 30 seconds before they're like, I'm done. How do you do it? How did you, let's say right now, lost your entire marketing budget? You had to launch dating again, only using your phone, social media, and your calendar. How would you go about spreading the word?
So, for one, this industry in particular is kind of a double edged sword because Match Group will buy up basically all the ad space for dating apps because they own most of the industry. So they basically churn you around the 12 or 15 apps that they own, and they buy up all the ad space so that anytime you're looking for a dating app, the option is one of their apps that's coming up as a suggestion. And that's, a lot. It's a somewhat smart way to do it because you're like, oh, dang it, Tinder doesn't work. I'm just going to go to OkCupid. And then you're like, OkCupid doesn't work. But every time you spend $20 and doing a month, and you're like, well, after a month, I guess I'll try a different one. But you don't realize they're all owned by the same company. And so that's kind of the model they've developed. On the flip side, it also just doesn't work very well. Their model is kind of like developed around systems that don't work because they kind of lose a customer when they do work. And so there is this the entire model is misaligned with the users, which gives us some edge. But I think what we've done is really just tried to grow it organically, which I think is something that I learned a lot from crypto, frankly. You can only pay so many shills to go out and just say the same thing over and over again. But if you have the three people who actually use it and get a ton of value out of it, and those are your core believers, and they're out there really telling all their friends and spreading the word through word of mouth, that's by far the most valuable thing you can have. And so just focusing on where is the need, how can we help these people, how can we learn from those early users and get good feedback to continually improve it over time. And also just, everyone has pushed us to go really big, really fast. And I think we pushed back and said, we're going to go slow and steady and learn and improve it over time and not go big until we really worked out the kinks. And I think that's allowed us to take a lot more risks and make a lot of changes that would have been really hard to do at scale, but are a lot easier when you don't have as many people. And when those people you do have are a little friendlier towards you because they've been there from the earliest days. And so I think there's a lot to learn from organic crypto community building on just how to build out that core audience. And it's something where it's so intimate that you do need to build a lot of trust with your user base if they're going to share. This is exactly what I'm looking for in a partner and the people I care about. This is my childhood trauma that affects my dating life to this day. People are going to want to know who's on the other side of that company. So we've also spent a lot of time just kind of like building up our personal platforms and trying to meet the right people to implicitly trust us and also back us, and thought leaders and people like that who can help drive us forward when we're ready. But it's definitely the hardest industry I've found from a marketing perspective. There's a lot of noise and not a lot of signal. And so it's a battle.
Here's the so I can imagine. So here's the thing, Google started off as don't be evil, to do greater good, organizing the world's knowledge and information. Stack started even better, can't be evil, just because of the choice of language or coding. Now, how do you communicate in terms of your data? Because I'm assuming that's going to be your revenue stream at some extent to make it really valuable what you're building. How do you sell that to, let's say you're going to sell it to me, besides getting a waifu, how are you going to sell me that, Rish, if you put in your banking information, you put in your crypto holdings information, your NFTs, for example, even connect your Facebook, for example, or LinkedIn, let's go wild. If I put in all the information, how do I know that you are not mulking me essentially like what Meta is doing? Or if you are mulking me, do I get a share of that revenue share? How do you communicate that aspect of it? And is that part of a business model?
So that part I will say is difficult, and that's where the trust comes in, because every one of these big companies that said we're not going to do that, and then they all go and do it behind your back, and then they just lie to your face the whole time, and then you find something in the terms and conditions, and then ultimately it becomes a trust thing, is what I would say. And so it's about building the trust with the users, letting them know, like, look, and being frank with them too. I think a lot of people don't understand the data market at all, and having been in the middle of it, a lot of times the data is a lot harder to sell than people realize. It's not as valuable at a small scale than they might realize. And so you do need vast quantities and vast amounts of users before, a big, firm who you might think of buying it, a lot of them would not even look at you till you have 250,000 people, for example. And so the numbers are bigger than people expect. It's a lot harder than people would expect to do it. But I think just really being frank with people and helping them understand how it works and what's happening. And, we frankly are not selling any of it, and we never will until people explicitly opt in. So one, it's just giving people optionality, letting them know, look, if this is something you want to do, we'll give you the tools to do it. We'll make it super easy, and we'll do it in the most responsible way possible. And we'll walk you through exactly how that works. If you don't, then we're going to give you as much granular control over what's out there and what you're sharing so that you feel comfortable throughout the process. And if you don't want to link any of it, we're still going to give you a platform that works almost as well, and it's going to be free, and it's going to provide you a lot more value than all these other ones that are charging 40, 50, $60 a month now for most of these other major ones. And so if we can just at least show them, look, we're providing a lot of value in return. You can choose what you put into the system. And if you really go all out and want to partner up with us on the monetization side of the venture, then when that time comes, we'll let you know, and we'll make it as easy as possible. And I think that's been the best way to do it. And it also tends to be the most effective way to get the high quality data that AI training labs and others want. Because if you create a purely pay to play system, which is what we had for our last company, you get a lot of people coming in who are just trying to make that 30 cents or a dollar or $5 or $50. But then they'll come and they'll just do their best to fake the data, fake documentation. We had people in my last company coming in with fake passports, fake social security numbers, getting through Plaid and Stripes verification systems, just like super sophisticated attacks. But those are a lot more common when people come in explicitly for that reason. And that's one reason Facebook frankly got such a valuable data set. Is it wasn't somewhere you came to make money, it was somewhere you came to go hang out with your friends and share fun little quizzes and join groups and talk about things. And so it was this like more organic means of doing it, which made it a lot more accurate. So fundamentally we want to provide that value first and foremost. And I think that's the right way to do it, but do it in a responsible way where we can be what Facebook could have been is really the goal. What they should have been if they had done it in the most responsible way possible instead of just kind of the worst way possible.
So you said something that caught my attention. It's going to be free. Now, how are you going to monetize something free then? Now, the reason I ask that is because everybody has advised us, or any projects have said, always charge from day one. You'll know who your true customers are. Otherwise, they're not customers, they are visitors or users. You cannot regard them as valuable. Now, how are you monetizing that? And if somebody wants to follow that approach, what's the mindset and what should they look out for in monetization?
So I'd say that's the second point that every VC has told us, aside from build in public, is immediately monetize. And that's the flavor of this cycle is immediately monetize and get your, but I think that's probably the dumbest thing that they've done this cycle. Because if you look at every billion-dollar company of the past 10 years, none of them have done that. Facebook never did that. Reddit never did that. Twitter didn't do that until very recently. They had no paid processes. Robinhood, the biggest trading app, no fees. They create spreads where they get fees and sell their data to Citadel and other places. And so, like, that's not been the business model that users are familiar with or comfortable with, and none of the business model that has scaled any of these products. And even if you look at gaming is moving to the freemium model where now, get everyone in on the ground floor and then sell them some premium add-ons as you go. And so I think that's been a fundamental mistake, especially for new technology when things are not quite perfect yet. I don't think you want to expect people will pay money for it until the product really is perfected. And so I've been very much on the side of we need to make this free and as accessible as everyone as our total addressable market is everyone. And you might want to go meet someone who doesn't have $5 every month to spend on this platform, and that might be your perfect person. And that's not something I want to prevent against. And I think what we've done to fundamentally change, I think, the model of the industry is try to align ourselves with the success of the user. And so eventually what we'd like to do, and this is part of why we're talking with like virtuals and some of the SBTC integrations with virtuals, is allow the bot to agentically plan out or purchase things for people that you are either going on dates on or already in a relationship with. And so if it's, hey, can I just send her some flowers real quick before this date to get her excited? Just ask the bot, beep, boop, beep, get some flowers sent. And right away it knows what her favorite flowers are, coordinates with the delivery service, and the flowers arrive. Or if it's, what should I get her for, Christmas this year? I just have no idea what she likes. It can say, her favorite artist is coming into town next month. Here are the tickets. Oh, I got them for you. Just click this button and you guys are ready to go. And so aligning ourselves with the success of the users to say, look, we can take a commission on all these things that you might want to buy for someone you care about. And we can help you with that process and personalize it so it really gives you good options and you don't have to spend as much time on research or the purchasing process. And we just kind of take those pain points out of it. And if you think about dating, most of the money is spent when you actually are taking them out on dates. It's really not being spent in the finding them process. It's being spent once you actually get to the point where you're more consistently dating. So there is a lot of money there. And if we can help people throughout that process, which I think men are frankly really struggling with these days, then we can provide value and we can get some value back in a way that people are not going to be too upset with what they're paying as a result of it.
It's really helpful advice and also insight. Definitely started getting my brain churning in terms of what we're doing at Boom as well. So here's the last two questions, Mark. One, VC money, blessing and a curse. What's the best thing VC money has done for you? And what's the hidden cost that founders do not think about enough when they take the money?
What has it done for me? I mean, it has allowed me to pay and retain people who I might otherwise have been able to afford to. But that's also a curse in a way, because then as soon as you lose those people, if the money stops coming through, then you're screwed. And I think, like, really fundamentally what I've understood, I mean, for one, most of my companies end up building them too early. The world isn't ready and we need enough runway to get to the point where the world is ready. And most of the time they die because we just don't have that runway. VCs don't get enough proof positive that things are going in that direction, and they fizzle out. Like my last data monetization company, it was like COVID when we sold it, and basically everything that could have gone wrong went wrong. Our co-founder passed away, COVID lockdowns happened, we started losing all of our clients, and we almost sold like a bunch of bigger companies that you guys would be familiar with, and ultimately sold to another crypto company. If we had just waited, if we'd been able to survive another 3 years, we had companies like Cled come out that were instantly worth like $100 million. And they claim like we're the first data monetization app. I was like, no, we did this, 4 or 5 years ago, and we had 100,000 people. We had 10 times, 100 times more than you guys have. And so sometimes the timing is everything. And I think once you get hooked on the VC money, they just continually want you to spend more and more and get more aggressive, because they are a lot less patient than we are, is one thing you have to realize. They want their money now. They want their win as soon as possible. Their incentives are not always aligned. They want that job promotion where they get managing partner if they get a company that hits 1 billion in 6 months. And if it's 12, then it doesn't matter because they're going to wait another 3 years for the review process. So they're going to push you to do something that is not necessarily in your best interest. And that's happened a lot. And I've taken a lot of VC advice that put me in a very bad situation that I did not want to be in, that I just trusted them. I'd say never take VC advice if they have not founded a company themselves. The only advice I ever get from VCs that's good is if they are a founder who has successfully run a company, then they will understand and they will typically give pretty good advice. But all the other ones who are just, managers typically will not give you good advice. They'll push you to launch before you want to. We launched probably earlier than I would have, and that was not something I think was ideal. And so I'd say the longer you can go without the VC money, the more that you can fill any gaps that you would otherwise pay people for, and ensure that at least if the money runs dry. My one goal with this company is I want to be able to run this company basically as a one-man army if necessary. If we lose any one person at the company because they have to go get another job and they just need the money or something like that happens, I want to be able to fill their role effectively enough to keep things going and make sure our costs are low enough that I can keep things going on my own with, getting a job at McDonald's if I need to. And that's pretty possible to do at this point. But if you take that VC money, if we had raised $2 million, burn rate was, $100,000 a month, like I can't keep us going for 3 months. And then if we do lose that money, then I got to cut, 90% of our staff, and then everything becomes a mess, and it becomes a lot harder to scale up and down once you've scaled up too much. So I think slow and steady is just the better way to do it. Everyone wants you to go aggressive. The same thing with the Federal Reserve, boom bust cycles. Let's lower the interest rates to -1 and then jack them up to 5%. And it's like, couldn't we just kind of, slow and steady, just not wreck everything and cause chaos? But I think there's not enough of that. But it takes patience and takes a lot of diligence on your part to keep it slow and steady.
Okay, now let's go down the last question. Well, maybe after that, I want to have a fun question. Founder mindset first. When everything feels like it's going wrong, and I know that you have always had a smile on your face even when things are, what do you personally do in the next 24 hours that helps you keep going instead of saying like, I'm done. This is too hard. It's not worth the pain here.
I mean, that happens more often than you could imagine, honestly. That is like a daily occurrence. I think there are two things probably. One, it's that it typically comes in waves. Everything will go wrong for a week, and then the next week, everything will go right. And so just always remembering, okay, well, yeah, everything can go wrong this week, but next week, might be that week where everything just aligns perfectly and we get right back on track. So never getting too pessimistic and always believing that there is going to be like a corner that you're going to turn, or the sun is going to come out eventually. You have to have that like almost reckless optimism, because if you don't, then, you will be screwed. You have to be somewhat delusional and a little narcissistic, I think, to make it work. And I think on those days, you have to have a good team who you lean on. My team is always there, willing to just kind of like get my spirits up. And on the days where I'm down, they're sending me podcasts about enlightenment or something. And they're sending me stuff where I'm like, okay, let's not stress too much. We're going to get through this. And just seeing, them suffering alongside me. I'm like, I can't give up. If they're suffering, I got to suffer a little more than them at least. And if they can handle that much suffering, I can handle a little bit more, and we'll get through it. So that part I think is really important. And then the last piece is just really believing in what you're doing. I think it would be much harder if I was doing like B2B SaaS or something where I just didn't care about the outcome. But I think what we're doing is very important. And it is like, at the end of the day, when there is a bug, it's stressful because it's like, oh, all of a sudden 10 people who could have met aren't going to meet, and they might not find that person. And I might have just screwed up a 20-year happy marriage by not fixing this bug and them not meeting. So there is some pressure, but it also is exciting to think like if we get this right, then we could do that times 1,000. We could get all of these people finding each other and improving their lives and doing something that actually makes a pretty big difference. And when you see Elon on Twitter saying the only chart that matters is the global birth rate, and you're like, okay, well, what are you doing about it? You're just creating these freaking AI waifus all day. Like, do something about it. And no one wants to do anything about it. And you're like, all right, well, they're not going to do it. Like, I guess I'm going to have to do it. But I think, and that's the other thing, is it's also very helpful when that is the case, when you're like, this is mission driven. We want to solve this problem. Even when competitors come out at some level, you're like, I'm kind of rooting for you too. And if I could have inspired you to also tackle this problem, like maybe it will take a few of us to figure this out. And I think that's a very crypto ethos where it's you realize the problem is big enough that there is enough room for a lot of different players and a lot of collaboration between them, because the fight is really against the really large incumbents who are screwing everything up as opposed to the smaller upstarts trying to solve the problem together.
It's really helpful advice. I'm going to steal some of that. Now, no, seriously, because I think very often, like you said, one week I'm high, the other week I'm like, can't be asked, but then you remember that why you're doing it helps tremendously. Now, okay, Mark, before we finish off, tell me, if you can, any successful stories that you have found using dating, number one, and what's the best pickup line you have seen that seems to hit all the sweet spot?
All right. Well, so I mean, this is honestly the hard part about running this company is like trying not to like put our users out there when they might not want their stories told. And so I try to use myself as an example as much as possible because I'm not really sure how to draw that line. And I want to create more aggregated research to put out and kind of say, okay, these are the trends we're noticing. Here are the interesting things. Like one interesting thing it told me, so it doesn't do a lot of pickup lines. We specifically asked it like to not be very good at pickup lines because we want those to be more organic. What it does is introduce you. And so it's like, hey, you're both really into crypto and you both really like this, and this. Like, I think you totally kick it off. Just, ask, why don't you guys start off the conversation by talking about if Kylo Ren is really a bad guy in the new Star Wars movie or something. And it'll really like fundamentally understand like what are these two people going to get interested in and actually want to talk about without this like awkward getting to know each other pickup line thing that just like 1 out of 10 guys is really good at, but really is no indication of who they are as a human. But I think one interesting thing it told me, because it will tell you like, what are the things in my profile that are like turning women off? And like, that's something you never find out on dating apps. Like, what is the thing that is like the red flag where they're all swiping left? And I found out pretty quickly it was like all the crypto stuff. They were like, honestly, just minimize the crypto. Girls do not like the crypto bro thing. And I was like, that's interesting. And honestly, if I had known like that was my big problem on the other dating apps, like I would have felt a lot less shitty. Like, oh, I'm not just ugly. They just hate crypto and they don't want to hear about my NFTs. And for some people, that's probably more obvious than it might have been to me. But, sometimes it's just the little things that, you might want to know that ultimately help you understand, it wasn't all these other things that I'm insecure about. It's just this dumb little thing, and it's really just how I'm framing myself, and that's not the whole of my personality. And it can do a really good job of making sure that girls who aren't interested in it, it de-emphasizes that a little bit, and those that are, it maybe emphasizes it a little bit more. And I'd say aside from that, just using it in my own life, it's pretty incredible at just I spend a whole week over the summer letting it plan my entire week with a girl that came to visit me from college who I hadn't seen in 10 years. And it planned everything we watched on Netflix, all the outings we went to, all the places we went to eat. I didn't know what are her dietary preferences? What is she like? I can't remember. Like, is she not eat cheese? Is she vegan? Like, what are those? And just figured out right away, okay, go to this taco place. You're both going to really love these tacos, and it's 10 minutes away. And then stop by this cute little trail on the way there and do a little hike. And once you get back, go to the Chinese garden because that's not too far away. And honestly, it was really great. It was so easy because I was busy. I was simultaneously working on the app, and it was also very good, even when she was coming to think about visiting me, it was kind of like I was like, all right, what's holding her back? And it could quickly figure out like, well, she's worried about, how busy you're going to be and if she's going to be imposing and, she's got to find a sitter for her dog and she's not sure how much flights are going to be and like if she can do it in time. And then it kind of systematically went through and helped answer those questions for her and said, look, I just checked Mark's calendar and he's really like a little less busy than he usually is. And I've been talking to him a lot lately. And honestly, he could use like someone to take his mind off work for a week because he's just been staring at the computer for a month straight and hasn't had any human interaction. So honestly, this will probably be good for him. So don't worry about that. And, I know you might have to handle the dog sitter thing, but I found this flight that leaves tomorrow and you'll be there, in 3 hours and he'll come pick you up from the airport. And she'd say, are you sure he'd pick me up from the airport? And be like, of course. Mark always, picks people up from the airport. He's happy to do that. And just kind of like works through all the little details that might be that one thing that you're worried about to just get you on that plane, get you to go do something and have that experience. And it worked great. So that was a pretty cool aha moment for me.
And that's useful advice, insight in terms of how the app is working. I'm married, so I'm not going to use it, but definitely my single friends that are looking up our app, I'm going to definitely introduce your app. Without a shadow
Well, I
of
mean,
doubt.
that's the thing. You can turn it on relationship mode. It'll take you out of the match pool. You
Ooh.
can use it with your wife, and it'll plan out your dates. It'll find you some little anniversary gifts. It'll when you're like, man, why is she so mad at me for working all day? It'll say, well, just take an hour off here, take her to her favorite place. Like she'll be a little more understanding after that. So
That's a
it's
good shout. That's a really good shout, mate. Mark, drop your handle if people want to contact with you directly, emails, socials, Telegram, anything that you're comfortable with. How do people find out about dating and also about Mark Kilaghbian?
So all the dating handles, it's DATAING.io or underscore IO. So on Twitter, it's underscore IO. It's .io for the website. You'll find us on LinkedIn and Instagram and TikTok and everywhere like that. For me, it's Kilaghbian, which is just my full name, which is probably going to be somewhere here. That's my handle across Twitter and Instagram and everything else. So you'll find me there. Definitely give me a follow. Sometimes do not respond on Telegram because I just have like a million crypto scammers hitting me up like every 5 minutes. So I don't know who's real and who's a scammer. So usually Twitter is a little bit better, or LinkedIn is honestly a pretty good way to get in touch with me. And if you do want to just like send me an email or anything, you can send it to mark@dating.io. And yeah, always happy to chat and always love feedback from anyone using the platform.
Mark, as always, thank you very much. I love the candid discussion today. How you shared in terms of how you started, your background, the ups and downs, how you grew, how you could grow again if you didn't have funding. All that stuff is going to be really helpful for individuals who want to just start. As always, thanks again, and I'll hit you up real soon. All right, thanks, Mark.
Thank you guys so much.